Hello everyone, welcome to another one of these collection videos, this time by popular demand. It is the 1999 Stephen Sommers classic action-adventure pick with Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz, The Mummy. Love this movie. I talked about this in depth in my favorite movies of all time video. I'll also be a little more brief here, but this is a movie that I saw the first two in theaters immediately, this one twice in theaters, watched this on VHS a million times, and we've had a couple different DVD editions over the year. This is the pretty easy to find collector's edition, just standard widescreen release of The Mummy. Man and I both adore that movie, and it just seems to be one of those universal things, no pun intended, as it's a universal movie, that everyone that I've ever met in my age demographic, like within like a 5 to 10 year range of my age, loves this movie. And it's weird because it feels like once you get older or a lot younger than that, it's not as popular. It's like it's one of those movies, and there's always movies like that for different generations where it hit just right. To me, this was finally getting the closest thing we were ever going to get to a fourth Indiana Jones movie, long before there was a fourth one that we don't talk about. And I love the chemistry, the excitement. It was the last, in many ways, of its type, this kind of adventure flick. There are certain types of movies that are dominant in certain eras, whether it's westerns or a particular look of movies in the 70s. In the 80s, a lot of the straight-to-video kind of slasher-type pictures, and there's a certain look and feel to action movies of the 80s, whether it's the US action movies, people like Arnold Schwarzenegger, or you go to Hong Kong, people like Jackie Chan. There is a certain look and feel to 80s action movies, and there are kinds of movies that feel defined by an era. Now it's the big superhero movies and cinematic universes and that kind of thing that'll eventually go away, but this was the last of this type of just fun adventure flick, Raiders of the Lost Ark type movie. Great movie. The follow-up, still love it. Mummy Returns, saw that in theaters, loved it. Obviously not as good as the first. There were a few things didn't work. I mean, the terrible CG on Scorpion King is pretty legendary, but aside from that, it did suffer from a lot of the typical sequel issues. There's even a line in there or with Brendan Fraser where he's like, we're at it again, that type of thing. There was that feeling, oh, we're at it again, those tongue-in-cheek moments that didn't quite work. But overall, I enjoyed the story. It had the same type of action, adventure, and humor, and of course we had the chemistry. That's the main thing that worked. It's kind of like watching the Thin Man movies. The thing that sells those movies and makes them amazing is the chemistry with William Powell and Myrna Loy. Same thing here. That's what works. And even the supporting cast in these first two, everyone does a great job. Especially right here we have one of Amanda's boyfriends. But everyone does a great job. It's a brilliant movie. Had that on DVD, and then another movie we had on DVD ended up selling once we got this Ultimate Collection on Blu-ray. This beautiful steelbook. This is one of my favorite steelbooks that we have in the entire collection. I'm going to go ahead and take this out of the packaging. I took a look at this when we first got it, but I just love the fact that everything's textured and wonderful, and this includes all three movies and The Scorpion King on Blu-ray. Nice little set. And The Scorpion King, there's been a few, more spin-offs to Scorpion King too as well, and those have been unwatchable in my mind. Even the Scorpion King, it was a fun, cheesy action flick, but that was about it. It was nothing special. It was fun, and I have watched it a couple times, and I still like it, but it's just kind of a take it or leave it generic action flick, not up to the adventure and comedic and romantic motifs of the first two. And then the third Mummy movie, which is such a disappointment in so many ways. It's not as bad as I think a lot of people make it out to be. There's still a lot of great action, and Jet Li is great, and just overall there are some great moments in it, but why it is so incredibly disappointing is that it did, in theory, do exactly what this franchise needed. After The Mummy and Mummy Returns, how do you continue? You can't just have the same villain coming back over and over again. It's not going to work. But there are other cultures all throughout the world that have mummies or some version of that would be usable. You know, it's not just, you know, the Egypt. I think we think of all the time, but it's not just Egypt that did that. And they took that to heart, and this could have continued for like 6-7 movies doing that theme. But the third one didn't live up to the promise of its premise, and the other problem is that without, you know, Rachel Weisz there, as I said, the thing that sells these movies is the chemistry of its two leads. They are perfect together, and missing either one of them, the movie, it just wasn't going to work. It didn't matter who was in that role. It's not a slight against the actress, because it didn't matter who they put in there. It was not going to be the same, and it was not going to work. It didn't matter how good they were. So overall, the third movie was still fun, but it, you know, it wasn't the classic of the other ones. And the last release we have is the 4K Blu-ray combo, one of the very few 4Ks that we have. I did a video on that collection just a few weeks ago, and it's because it's an all-time favorite for both of us. It's one of those overlap movies that, you know, there are a lot of movies that Amanda and I both enjoy, but when you get down to our absolute favorites, there's not as much overlap, but this is one of those few that really just hits the right mark for both of us, and we watch it all the time. I think I've probably watched it an average of once a year at least. More recently, because my very young cousin got into the Mummy movies and he loved them, so I watched them a couple times with him the past couple years. So, I mean, it's just a great, fun movie that I will never get tired of. It's one of those types of movies. And one thing that is missing from this collection that would be cool if I ever found it in the wild, but there's no way I would ever actually look for it, is The Mummy was released on Laserdisc, the first one, both in the US and in Japan. They have become prohibitively expensive. There's the rare case, like something like Lex, something very, very special, a Japanese box set, but for the most part, my limit for a Laserdisc is like $10-15. You know, it's gotta be something real special, like a Star Trek or something, like a box set or something. Individual disc, no way. And The Mummy is $100 to $200 plus sometimes. It's really, so no. But the first one was released on Laserdisc, in Japanese edition and the Signature Collection edition in the US. That's pretty cool. So if I ever found that in the wild, I would grab it. And the last thing we have in the collection, none of the video games. They were, you know, typical license games type things. Never really worked out. The short-lived cartoon series was also pretty bad. I never got into that. We have a handful of the comic releases. The first part of the prequel leading up to the third movie, and then the complete edition of that. And that was fun, again, leading up to a disappointing movie, but still fun. I enjoyed having a little bit more story in that regard. This is, you know, a great franchise. There's always the potential of it coming back, even as, you know, they're both older. They're both, you know, still great actors doing a lot of great work, and, you know, even some physical work. So there's always a very slim possibility that the Renaissance could lead to another Mummy movie with the two of them. That would be pretty amazing. That would be cool if we got that like right after this new Indiana Jones. That would be a nice back-to-back, but doubt it'll happen, but it's possible. Great series of movies. Enjoy them all. Really, really love the first one.